we're back into session right now. Sorry for the delay and the interruption. Our next one is the monthly budget report, state financial profile. Tim, is this you?
Yes. The monthly financials, the revenue for the month was only $148,000. The reason being that we didn't receive any property taxes during the month of December, but as I've explained before, we've received actually property taxes, the first collection on property taxes, we were actually over what we budgeted. So we probably aren't going to see any more property taxes or certainly anything significant until we get to February and we start to receive the March payments. On the expenditures, $1.8 million in the operating funds. We did have significant payments out of the bond and interest funds. We make an annual payment on our principal that we owe. That was $3.6 million that was made in December. And on interest, we pay that semi-annually in December and in June. We paid $1.1 million in December, so you can see that of the $6.6 million in total expenditures for the month, $4.8 million was for bond, principal, and interest. On a year-to-date basis, our revenue is 49% of budget. As I mentioned, property taxes were about $95,000 over budget in terms of what we budgeted for the fall collections. There were some questions with regard, one was with regard to the transportation fund. It was about $40,000 under where it was last year. The reason being that on the reimbursements that we get for special ed transportation, last year we received 2 reimbursements by the end of December. This year we only had received 1 from the state, but we did receive another reimbursement for $47,000 in the month of January. So actually we're right up where we should be. Question with regard to the pay to participate. We're about $26,000 under budget.
Tim, how are you moving around? So are you still under expenditures, or are you just jumping around here?
Can we go by pages?
Oh.
That would help.
Just tell me what page you're on, I'll give the page number.
Page 9.
Right now I'm looking at page 15. There were a couple questions there on
I got a couple
On the
questions on
revenue
page 9.
He's on page 15, which is page 2 of the statement of revenues. At the top, it's page 2. At the bottom, it's page 15. Everyone there?
yeah,
Anyone not there?
I'm not there.
Okay, it'd be page 15 of your board book. And it's statement of revenues, page 2 at the top.
Okay, I see it.
Okay.
okay, there were 2 questions on that. One was with regard to the registration fees. We've collected $241,000 out of $267. The question was whether or not we would expect to be about $26,000 under budget when we come to the end of the year. The answer to that would be no. Last year, in the second half of the year, we collected about $76,000 in registration fees. So at this point, we've sent all of the accounts that are past due out for collection, and we will be receiving more money as we go through the rest of the year. The pay to participate on the clubs, there was a difference in terms of what's on the financial reports and what was in one of the reports that you'll be reviewing later. The reason being that in December, we hadn't transferred all of the money out of the registration fees into the pay to participate for the clubs. That'll be done in January, so you're going to see that number for the clubs jump up in January.
The realized year-to-date number?
Right.
Okay.
So that was the reason for that. And just to look at the total expenditures, we're at 54% of budget, but that's primarily due to that bond and interest payment. If you take out the $3.6 million we made in, if you just look at the operating funds, we're at 46% of budget. I did also include in board book the quarterly projections. When I looked at the revenue, I see a few items that are fairly significant that we're probably going to come in over budget. I estimated that those items were probably about $160,000 in total. The biggest questions with regard to the revenue side is the property tax refunds. We budgeted, as you know, $848,000 for the whole year. We haven't really paid any refunds out at this point in time. How much we'll pay out during the rest of the year or not, is obviously a question mark. But that could be an area where, similar to last year, we pick up a significant amount of, our revenue is better than we had budgeted in
fact,
total.
Those are all in the opposite direction. Does that mean we're collecting old
We're
payments
actually-
we didn't anticipate?
Yes, we're actually, yes, we're collecting property taxes from prior years.
But Tim, let me ask you something right now. Property tax refunds, those are the ones that we owe them because they have appealed.
Right.
Do we have to hold any abeyance, or we have to hold any funds on the side? In an escrow type thing, or not? Or
No.
do we just handle it? Okay.
No, we just budgeted.
If we have the money in the bank and the judgment comes through to pay, they take the money. If we don't have money in the treasurer's bank when the judgment comes through, as soon as money comes in the bank, they take it.
Okay.
And that
Yeah.
dollar amount that was budgeted was determined or advised from our legal counsel at Frantic, who handles all of our property tax appeals.
And Gary asked this before, but is there a way for you to know if there's any significant pending appeals out there?
I know that the one significant one that's out there is the actual mall, the North Riverside
Right.
Mall. It's not one of the stores, but it's the actual mall. And one of the other large stores is also out there. I can't remember right
It
offhand
was
which one.
Sears, you said before,
But
right?
I can look into that. I can talk to the attorney and try and get an update from him
Sure.
on that type of thing. The other question on the revenue for the rest of the year is what the state's gonna do. Right now, they've been making the payments on the reimbursements for special education, transportation, and for the special ed personnel and that. If they continue that, then I think we're gonna come in at budget with regard to the state revenue, but there's no telling what they'll do when it gets later into the year. They may decide not to make some of the payments, which is what they've done in prior years. So we just have to wait and see what that is. And on the expenditure side for the rest of the year, again, I don't really see any areas that are really significantly varying from budget other than what I've talked to you about before with the electricity. We budgeted 400,000, we've only paid 164 through the first half of the year, so we could see some savings there. Also included in your packet was the state
Can I ask
financial.
Can I ask a question on this still? Because
Mm-hmm.
Matt even alluded to it. You mentioned in here that you're considering going out on bids for purchasing certain services on page 9.
Correct.
I'd like to encourage you and Kevin to consider, like you mentioned, cell one or call one. We must pay phone bills to 10 different organizations. And, is there a way to consider, and the same thing with transportation, we pay transportation to at least 4 or 5 different organizations. Is there a way to consider consolidating all of our, whether it's cell, hardwire, whatever our phone services, and try to, I realize you might have contracts or whatever, bid it out, or the same thing with transportation, to see if there's companies that would, cover all of our transportation needs and maybe get a discount because of it?
We all bundle.
Well, on the phone service, yes, we can look at trying to combine it and see what we can get there. On the transportation, the transportation contract that we have is with Illinois Central, and that's to do all of our field trips. The other transportation that we have is with Grand Prairie for special education, and we don't bid that. LADSI bids that out, and they determine who the provider is going to be for the transportation for all of the districts.
Does that include all the taxis we pay for too?
Yeah.
That's part
Oh.
of, that's done by LADSI also.
All right.
So really, all we're looking for is athletics and
Okay.
field trips.
And is Illinois Central service improved?
We've had a couple of problems this year, not what we had last year, but it's still something that we'll take a look at.
Anything else, Tim?
Why don't you go about the state financial profile? That's pretty important.
Yeah, the state financial profile, they do this every year. It's based on our annual financial report. The profile that came out for this year, we're at a 3.6, that's out of a 4. We're in a financial recognition category, which is the highest category. I did include in your packet the publication from the Illinois State Board of Education that goes through with some of the explanations, but there's 5 different factors that they use, that they look at to determine the score. The 2 major ones are fund balance to revenue and expenditures to revenue. That accounts for 70% of your score. And in those cases, we came out very favorably partially because of the accrual on the real estate taxes. I mean, that was pulled in, and if you look at the, it shows a fund balance of 13 million, it shows revenue of $27 million. Obviously, our cash balance revenue is not $27 million, but that number includes all of those property tax dollars that were received in July and August. But still a very good score, and I think it's the same score as it was last year. So,
What happens if you get a low score?
well, they do have, if you get a low score and you get it continuously, they do have individuals at the state that are supposed to come out and help you with your finances, but I think they have 3 people to cover 900 school districts, so you don't get, there's nothing really significant that the state board can do for you.
Okay, any other questions for Tim?
So it's good we're in the top rating,
Yes.
but it's almost kind of accidental because we got our property tax payments early and were able to accrue them last year. I mean, is it going to have the opposite effect on us this year potentially? If the property tax revenues don't come in soon enough?
Don't come in at that point. I can go through and do an estimate of where it would be, I mean, right off.
No, I mean,
It certainly,
it's your gut
the
reaction.
numbers look better, because of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted Tim to put the expiring purchase service contracts, just so that the board's aware of some things that might be coming to bid and things that we'll be working on throughout the spring semester before the end of the fiscal year. So those would be the 3, the phone system, vending, and transportation.
Kevin, does the field trip include the athletics, or is it a separate contract?
It's all the same. We use them for buses, for field trips, and then all after-school activities. And I believe that was bidded out the year before my arrival.
That's right.
So this is their 3rd year of a 3-year contract. So we've had some issues, and this would be one of those, like, just want to make sure we probably check on everything and see if there's any other services out there that we haven't looked at.
2 questions. How do the mini buses fit into that? Because we lease them, right?
Yeah, they're not related to them.
Into the transportation, do they help with our transportation costs?
We use them for some transportation of special ed students. We use that for some smaller teams when they're going to practices and stuff like that. So that does help with our transportation costs. It's not related to this contract, though. That's a separate lease that we do to pay those off.
And then, do we have, and Tim, you would know better, do we have a specific policy that says we should bid each of our contracts every 3 or 5 or whatever the years are? We don't. Okay.
It just follows the state guideline for if you do hire new services or go out for new bids, depending upon the dollar amount and the type of service it is, you would have to bid it out. But it doesn't say we're going to bid any particular service based at any particular timeline.
I know District 95 has a policy, we're talking about that they set a certain amount of years, and after so many years, as a practice, they just put out bids to make sure they're still getting the best price.
Any other questions?
2 questions, Tim. In regards to the capital projects, what did we budget the 20,000 for to be spent in the capital projects fund?
What-
20,714.
Oh, the capital projects fund? We
Yeah.
really didn't budget anything specifically. It's just something where I think we should, we should take some of the money out of that as we go through the year that fits into that, so that we actually,
Yeah, because we haven't
Bring that
spent
down.
anything, or nothing's been
Right.
expenditure-wise. Have you looked at it? Are you gonna, have you had a chance to look to see if there's anything we've spent that we applied against it?
yeah, we did have some things coming up that we were talking about
Is that
paying out
Fund
of that
60?
fund.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Fund 60.
We talked about, that was some of the last few thousand that was left over from the construction
Right.
project. So like right now, we're rekeying 14 doors to help with some of these safety recommendations. We're gonna use some of that money. We're looking at the definitely some capital
Okay.
projects.
And the second item was, there was the talk on the cell tower from a revenue standpoint. Has that progressed anywhere?
With regard to,
I thought we had a particular lessee up, and there's some talk to review that contract.
We rejected their first two offers. They sent us a third offer, and then we're reviewing now, and then we'll bring that to finance and then to the whole board.
Okay, so nothing progression.
Not
Okay.
to where I think
Okay.
we need to rush on anything.
the other thing on the capital projects fund, when we get to the end of the year, if we haven't spent all the money, the board can actually pass a resolution to transfer that money into the operations fund, because that project's been closed out.
Or can it stay in the capital for next year?
Right.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Tim? Tim, great job. Now we're gonna go to principal's report. Pam?
What
Okay.
was another part of his report? The business office procedures?
I got state financial profile and expiring purchasing services.
He has also,
But he included in there.
he included in there, and the board
Procedures.
member had requested that a while back, but he needs to cover that.
All right.
There were a couple questions on that. One had to do with the controls that we have with regard to approval of purchase orders and invoices and the check processing. Usually the requisitions, the purchase orders are coming from department chairs, from teachers approved by department chairs. The invoices also go back to those people to approve, because obviously we want to make sure that they received what they ordered, that it was in good condition, that type of thing. But those people don't have anything to do with the check processing. That's done. I actually sign all of the checks that come out of there, so they don't, they have nothing to do with the checks or the cash disbursements. There was there was also a question of whether or not there are exceptions with regard to the budget. It did note in the procedures that we have a process in place to make sure that we're not going over budget, but there are areas where we're going to go over budget. You know, if we have repairs that come up and they're gonna take us over budget, obviously in cases we have to do the repairs. You know, we can't not repair things because we haven't budgeted that money. You know, professional services would be another thing. For example, we've budgeted a certain amount for our attorney's fees, but based on things that may happen during the course of the year, that's an item that could go over budget. Some line items where we've received additional money from grants and things like that, we have line items set up for the expenditures that would end up putting us into a situation where we're over budget on those accounts. So yes, there are exceptions to that. And there was also a question regarding payments that we make to employees and sports officials that come out of the interest account. That's really based more on past practice, that those kinds of reimbursements and payments have come out of interest and haven't waited until the board meetings.
It makes sense. Actually, it was the explanation you said, the way you described it, you said if there's payment terms and are due before the board meeting, we do it. And
Oh,
really,
okay.
the majority of items on there don't have any payment terms. It's more of a practice of what you do with certain
Right,
kinds of
right,
payments. But I will say that there's certainly items on that impressed account that could go into the normal treasurer's thing, but you must just have a practice with certain things that you're willing to put them in there.
Right, and I try to monitor that, and if I see something that's coming through on an interest check, I try to talk to the people in my department about saying, okay, let's
Okay.
put this on a board, board approval first.
And I'll bring the last one because it's kind of delicate. It's not a question that I don't trust people here, but, we'll use the most extreme example, the Dixon. It's still unclear to me whether there's a separation of the duties of all the people from Kevin on down in the accounting office, that how much that somebody has the ability to both put a purchase order in, approve a payment, without somebody else who's not connected with it making some kind of approval, which I put that, I might have forgot to send it, but, I just, one of those organizations that said, here's the best way to do controls, and that's a significant, well, you guys are the CPAs, Mike, that's a significant control issue, and I still don't have a feel for whether 100%, we definitely, like, if you, for instance, your expenditure, who approves it? Or, Kevin's expenditure, who approves it? So that we know that there's a separation of duty to protect our assets. Or somebody who works for you,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well, Most of the requisitions are coming from teachers and through department chairs, and they're being approved by administrators before they come to our office. You know, and then we're reviewing them to make sure that they have the budget dollars and that
Sure.
type of thing. You know, if Kevin's putting through requests for reimbursements and things like that, that also is coming to me for approval.
Okay.
I'm looking at it to make sure the receipts are there, to make sure it's within budget, that type of thing. So
Is there 100% separation that nobody in your office can both put in a purchase order, do both sides of the transaction, so that we're protected from that control?
Well, the person who handles the purchase orders and the invoices does cut the checks, yes. But the checks but all of that comes through me for approval, so,
That's the control, then
Yeah.
you would have to approve it. Okay.
Okay, anything else?